in western Ukraine, where Russian forces have attacked the area around the airport of Lviv. The extent of the destruction is unclear at this point. But the city's mayor says Russian missiles hit the aircraft maintenance plant, not the airport itself. Up until now, Lviv had been largely spared from major attacks. The city is located less than 100 kilometers east of the Polish border and has taken in some 200,000 internally displaced people since the war started. We can now speak to DW.
You get used to all the explosions. You're not really scared anymore. When something hits nearby, I've stopped running into the cellar. It just becomes normal. I get stressed when there's no internet, and I can't reach my relatives or my girlfriend, who already managed to get to Germany. All I think about is when I'll be able to get out of here and see her. The explosions and the shooting aren't as scary anymore as losing touch with the people you love.
Well, since we spoke to him, Yuri has managed to escape Mariupol. Many others have been less fortunate, with attempts to organize reliable evacuation corridors failing as Ukraine accuses Russia of ignoring its ceasefire commitments. We're joined now by Yevgenia Kravchuk. She's a Ukrainian MP and a member of President Zelensky's Servant of the People Party. Welcome to DW. We really appreciate your joining us. You and your country have now endured more than 3 weeks of war. Let me begin by asking you how you're doing personally.
Well, I'm doing as every MP is doing. I'm doing my job. I'm working as MP because the parliament has been gathering for a few times since this full-scale war started. Also, I'm part of, we call this women diplomatic battalion, and I've just returned from Strasbourg, where we had meetings in European Parliament and Council of Europe. And actually, Council of Europe expelled Russia from membership, and it's the first international organization that had the courage to exclude Russia from the membership. My husband is fighting, and my daughter is sleeping in the basement.
positive comments, but there are also a lot of Russian trolls doing typical whataboutism, saying, hey, Schwarzenegger, what about Syria? What about Iraq, other countries where US invaded? Why were you silent at that time? So I would say that some Russian critical media also published that, and this is probably the best way to reach Russians. But you have to understand that more than half of Russian population supports this war, so the effect would be limited.
Roman, Western officials are accusing Russia of not taking the peace talks seriously. Yet the Kremlin says Russia is putting colossal effort into talks on a possible peace deal with Ukraine. What do you make of this?
Well, from Russian point of view, you don't have to reconcile that because President Putin has made it very clear he's not going to stop. The war will continue until Ukraine surrenders. This is what he said, and this is what he's repeating nearly every day. As to the peace talks, I'm very, very skeptical. I think it's an attempt, a Russian attempt, to disguise the West, to disguise Ukraine, maybe to win some time, to pull up resources, because the Russian offensive is not going well. And I wouldn't be very optimistic about those negotiations. So for the coming days and week, I think the situation will get worse.
President Biden called Vladimir Putin a murderous dictator, a pure thug who is waging an immoral war against the people of Ukraine. How bothered is the Kremlin by this name-calling from the White House, you think?
Well, we've heard some criticism from the Kremlin, but I think they actually do not care. We are beyond the point where they care about Western remarks or what Western leaders say about Russia or Vladimir Putin. And I think also such remarks like by President Obama in 2014, when he said Russia was a regional power, and there are experts in the West who tend to say that was a mistake. I don't actually think that President Putin cares about such things. He sees himself as a big commander who is doing historic, who is waging historic wars or bringing glory back to Russia. So he doesn't really care, I think.
Russia analyst Roman Goncharenko, many thanks, Roman. The World Health Organization says indiscriminate attacks across Ukraine have damaged hospitals and crippled healthcare services. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus warned the war could have a devastating impact on Ukraine's citizens and healthcare system for decades.
The disruption to services and supplies in Ukraine is posing an extreme risk to people with cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, HIV, and TB, which are among the leading causes of mortality in Ukraine.
Here's a look now at some of the other developments in the conflict. The United Nations Undersecretary General has called for an investigation into the civilian casualties in Ukraine. Speaking at the UN Security Council, Rosemary DiCarlo said international law prohibits attacks on civilians, and those responsible must be held accountable. Russian strikes have destroyed schools, hospitals, and residential buildings. Australia and Japan have announced new sanctions on Russia as punishment for the invasion of Ukraine. The sanctions target multiple individuals and organizations, including Russia's central bank, finance ministry, and 2 oligarchs linked to Australia's mining industry. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance must prevent any escalation of the war beyond Ukraine's borders. He was speaking in Berlin after meeting German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. The foreign minister said more German troops would be sent to NATO's eastern borders. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russia is making no meaningful diplomatic effort to end the war in Ukraine. He also said he agrees with President Biden that Russia has committed war crimes. Biden added that he believes Russia's Putin is a murderous dictator waging an immoral war. Meanwhile, NATO has been conducting a massive military drill in Norway. The alliance says the maneuvers are designed to test troops' readiness for combat in cold conditions. Some 30,000 soldiers from 27 countries are involved. DW's Jack Pyrick reports from Camp Iryna in Norway.
Fire and maneuver. 2,500 French, Polish, Spanish and Portuguese soldiers taking part in this NATO exercise called Brilliant Jump. The soldiers told us the invasion of Ukraine has bolstered their determination to defend their countries.
This exercise, we actually can see that we are a solid group. It's